I heard it with my own ears. Why is she even still alive? The laugh that followed wasn't loud, just sharp enough to split something deep inside me. I stood behind the wooden gate, holding a glass dish of peach cobbler, still warm. My hands didn't tremble. Not yet. I didn't leave. I walked through that backyard like I hadn't heard a thing. Past the string lights, past the picnic tables, past the faces that didn't turn toward me. Some of them were my blood. Some were strangers. None of them smiled. Someone cleared their throat. "Oh, Mabel. We didn't know you were coming." That was Jody, my son's wife. The same voice from behind the fence. "I brought cobbler," I said. No one offered to take the dish. I found a spot at the far end of the table. The folding chair creaked beneath me. My back ached, but I sat up straight. The air smelled like grilled meat and citronella candles. Music blasted from someone's speaker, too loud, too fast, meant for people who still believed their knees would last forever. They laughed, ate, drank. I watched. Carl made a toast at one point. "To family," he said, raising a beer. When the glasses clinked, no one looked my way. The children, my grandchildren, ran past me 3 times. No one stopped. No one said, "Hi, Grandma." I wondered if they even recognized me without the apron or the grocery bags. I used to bring gummy worms in Ziploc bags. Jody eventually approached. She leaned in with that tight-lipped smile she wears when cameras are around. "Did you want a plate?" I looked up at her. "I'm fine." She nodded too quickly and walked away before I could say more. I stayed until the end. I helped stack plates, folded napkins, wiped the sticky table with a damp paper towel while everyone else drifted indoors. Then I picked up my empty glass dish, still warm from the afternoon sun, and left. Not in anger, not in sorrow, but with a decision. The next morning I made coffee in my smallest pot. Just 1 cup. I sat at the table by the window. The same table where Carl used to do his homework, legs too long for the chair. Back then he needed me. Now he barely tolerated me. I didn't speak to anyone that Sunday. The cobbler dish was clean, dry, and put away. I left the house once to bring in the mail, but I didn't open the envelopes. I wasn't ready to see his name on the electricity bill again. That house, their house, had been mine once. At least the down payment. $40,000 from my retirement account. Back when I believed in second chances and family investments. "Just to help you get started," I'd said. No strings apparently. No place at the table either. The paperwork was still in my filing cabinet. I never needed to look at it before. Now I wanted to see it, not the numbers. I knew the numbers. I wanted the names. Whose name was on what? Who truly owned what I'd given? I pulled out the folder labeled Carl House. Inside, the purchase agreement. The deed. The signed letter I'd written, gifting the money with no expectation of repayment. "Because you're my son." Reading that line hurt more than I expected. That evening I called a woman named Lena. She isn't a friend, not exactly, but she's sharp. Used to work in probate. We met at Bridge years ago and stayed in occasional contact. I told her I had questions about property, gifts, estate documents. She didn't ask why. "Come by tomorrow," she said. "Bring everything." I slept well that night. No pills. No pacing. Not peace exactly, but alignment. In the morning I dressed carefully. Iron slacks. Real shoes. The good coat, even though it was too warm. When you're about to change the shape of your life, you wear something with buttons. Lena's house smelled like lemon cleaner and peppermint tea. She skimmed the documents and gave a small grunt. "No written expectations. No shared title," she said. "It's theirs now. You gifted it." "I know," I said. "But that doesn't mean you're powerless." She told me what could still be done. Accounts, wills, powers of attorney. "You can't take the house back," she said. "But you can make sure they don't get anything else." That was enough. She gave me a checklist. I folded it in half and slipped it into my purse. That evening I sat at the kitchen table. No music. No television. Just the silence I used to hate, and now welcomed. I took a blank sheet of paper and wrote a name at the top. Carl. Then I drew a single line through it. On Wednesday I baked a pie I didn't intend to share. Blueberry with lemon zest. I used the good crust recipe, the one I saved for birthdays and Thanksgivings. This time it was just for me. No reason. No occasion. just because I still could. I sat on the porch while it cooled, knees tucked under the old Afghan Doris gave me before she passed. The street was quiet, kids on bikes, a lawnmower 2 houses down. One of those afternoons where nothing big happens unless you're watching closely. Around 4, a car I recognized pulled into the driveway across the street. Jody's sister, Michelle. Tote full of groceries. Bottle of wine. She knocked once and went inside without waiting. Comfortable. Certain of her place. I hadn't been invited to that house in nearly 4 months. Not since Ruby's birthday. Even then they'd sat me near the trash bin. "So you won't be too close to the music, Mom," Carl had said like it was thoughtful. Ruby hadn't opened my gift until after I left. A hand-stitched picture book. I'd written a note inside the cover. Everything a grandmother can fit on 1 page. She never mentioned it. I'd seen them twice since. Once at the grocery store, Carl in a rush, Jody pretending not to notice me and produce. Another time at the library. Ruby walked right past me. No smile. Just a glance like I was a substitute teacher or a neighbor she couldn't place. Still, I kept a drawer in the hallway filled with stickers, tiny notebooks, little treasures for the kids, just in case. That day I emptied it. Everything went into a paper bag. I set it by the curb with the recycling and watched it sit there for hours untouched. Just like me. That evening Carl messaged, "Hey, Jod says she might have hurt your feelings on Sunday. Didn't mean anything by it. She was just tired. You know how family events can be." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. I wouldn't archive his explanations anymore like museum pieces. I'd done that too long, stored excuses like mementos, wrapped in the soft padding of he didn't mean it and she's under stress. No more. 7. Someone knocked. For a moment I thought maybe. But it was Kay from next door, holding lentil soup and asking if I'd seen her cat. I hadn't. I invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table and split the pie. She didn't ask about Carl. Didn't ask why my eyes looked heavier than usual. She just said the pie was so good it made her knees hum. We laughed. I needed that laugh more than I realized. After she left, I picked up a photo from the hallway shelf. Me and Carl. 1987, he was 8, missing a front tooth, smiling like I was the whole world. I looked at that boy and whispered, "I miss you." Not the man. The boy. I turned the photo face down. Then I opened my desk drawer and removed the envelope labeled legal. Inside, my will, my medical directives, the durable power of attorney Carl had signed 3 years ago after my fall. The one he never followed up on. Never asked about. I held it in my lap a long time. Tomorrow I go back to Lena. That night, I sat in the dark and said goodbye to a version of my family that only existed in memory. Lena's office was quiet the next morning. The kind of quiet that wraps around you like a thick scarf. Files stacked neatly. A mug that read I read contracts for fun. A glass jar of peppermints no one ever touched. "I want to start with the power of attorney," I said, placing the document in front of her. "Revoke it today." She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "Are you sure, Mabel? That's a big shift." "I'm sure." She nodded, slid the paper toward her side of the desk. "We'll file the revocation today. I'll notarize it. You'll need to sign a few things. I'll make it easy." My heart didn't race. I wasn't trembling. This wasn't revenge. This was repair. "I also want to adjust the will," I said. "Remove Carl as executor. Remove him completely." That gave her pause. "You want to cut him out entirely?" I nodded. "He has a house, a job, a family. He doesn't need what I've saved. He's already made clear what he values." She didn't argue. Just opened a clean template and began typing. "Who should take his place?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I'll find someone. Professional, maybe. Someone who doesn't look through me like I'm a loose end." She made a note. "And the house?" "The house goes to no one in the family," I said. "Sell it. The proceeds should go to a cause that matters." "Any ideas?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a worn brochure. The women's shelter on Greenway Avenue. I stayed there once long ago, before Carl was born. She didn't say anything for a while. Just clicked a few boxes on her screen. "You're very clear about this," she said. "I've been unclear long enough." When the documents were ready, I signed everything in careful, deliberate strokes. She notarized them, stapled them neatly, and handed me a copy of each. As I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. If you change your mind, any of it, just call. I won't. The air outside felt sharper than before. The sun was out, but it didn't matter. Some days you carry your own weather. I pulled my coat tighter and walked slowly back to my car. At home the phone was blinking. One message. Hey Mom. Got your voicemail about legal stuff. Not sure what's going on. Jody said you were acting weird last weekend. Anyway, call me. Okay. I deleted it. Then I blocked the number. The next morning I called a locksmith. The man was young, polite. He replaced the front and back door locks without question. When he handed me the new keys, I made 4 copies. One stayed in my purse. One went into a fireproof box. One with K next door. One for my safety deposit box. I slept better that night. No dreams, just rest. Saturday morning came with the smell of rain. Not the dramatic kind. Just that soft metallic damp that settles into the edges of things. I pulled on my boots and went outside anyway. The garden hadn't been touched in weeks, and the marigolds were leaning like tired shoulders. I clipped them back slowly, methodically. The shears in my hand felt like control. At noon I drove to First Mutual Credit Union. The branch was quieter than I remembered. No long lines. Just the low hum of printers and polite customer service voices. I asked for a manager. A woman named Trina came out, brisk but kind, and led me to her glass-walled office. I'd like to review all authorized users on my accounts, I said. She pulled up the screen. You have 1 cosigner and 1 authorized cardholder listed. Carl J. Hemsworth. That your son? Used to be. She hesitated. Would you like to remove him? I'd like to erase him. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. Completely. Yes. Remove the access. Cancel the card. Reissue everything in my name only. I'd like new security questions, a new online login, and the account locked until I come in personally. She nodded and began typing. While she worked, I stared at the plant on her desk. A pot hose, its leaves glossy and heart-shaped, trailing gently toward the floor. I used to have one just like it in Carl's nursery. He once tried to eat the dirt. I'd laughed so hard I nearly dropped the diaper bag. Trina printed the changes and slid the papers toward me. If you'd like to set up alerts or create a trust, we can help with that too. Not yet, I said. I'm still building the next version of my life. She smiled like she understood more than she said. When I left the bank, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. At home, I went to the hall closet, the one with the photo boxes, the holiday tablecloths, and the quilt I never finished. I took out the fireproof lockbox and opened it. Inside were my most important documents. The deed to the house, birth certificates, insurance policies. I removed Carl's birth certificate. Not to destroy it, just to separate it. I placed it in a folder labeled History and stored it in a drawer away from everything else. That night I opened my address book. It still had tabs from the 90s, little plastic dividers yellowed with time. I flipped to see and stared at the names. Carl, Jody, Ruby, Trent. I took out a pen and drew a single line through each one. Then I flipped to L and wrote a new name. Lena Moore, Attorney, Trust and Estate. I slept with the windows open that night, the rain tapping soft percussion on the roof. No nightmares. Just a quiet, steady knowing. Sunday, Kay came by again, this time with banana muffins. We sat in the kitchen and talked about the stray cat that had taken up residence under her porch. We named it Vernon for no good reason. She stayed until just after lunch. After she left, I picked up the Sunday paper and read it cover to cover. I underlined a listing for a small apartment in a quiet complex on the edge of town. 2 rooms. Ground floor. Washer and dryer included. Just enough. I clipped it out and set it on the fridge. Not for now, but for soon. I wasn't running. I was preparing. Because the next time someone asked, why is she even still alive? I wanted the answer to be clear. To reclaim everything I gave away too cheaply. On Monday, I called the real estate attorney Lena recommended. A man named Charles Lindell. His voice was steady, low, the kind you trust before you ever meet the eyes behind it. I told him I wanted to discuss title changes and property transfers. He gave me an appointment for Thursday. In the meantime, I gathered everything. The deed, property tax records, repair invoices from 20 years, New roof, new plumbing, the furnace Carl had said wasn't worth the investment, but I'd paid for anyway. Every receipt was a thread in the story they wanted to forget. I made neat copies. I labeled folders. When I was finished, my dining table looked like the war room of a woman no one had expected to resist. That night the phone rang again. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Mabel, it's Jody. Look, we really don't understand what's going on. Carl's been trying to call. Ruby's been asking about you. We're all worried. Please call us back. I turned off the machine. The lie sat in the air like old perfume. Ruby hadn't said a word to me in weeks, not even on my birthday, which came and went with nothing but a Facebook notification from Jody that read, "Hope you're having a great one," beneath a photo of their dog. That was the birthday I sat alone in my kitchen and made myself a single cupcake just to mark the day. They weren't worried. They were unsettled. And there's a difference. On Thursday, I put on my navy cardigan, the one with the mother-of-pearl buttons that still shone when I held them to the light. I arrived at Charles Lindell's office 20 minutes early. His receptionist offered me coffee. I declined. My hands didn't need caffeine that day. Charles was kind in a quiet, intelligent way. The kind of man who listens more than he speaks. I liked him immediately. "I want the house in a trust," I said once we were seated. "No one in my family has access. Not now. Not later." He nodded. "A living trust is straightforward. You'll be trustee and beneficiary for now. When you pass, it can go wherever you choose. I want it sold. Everything liquidated. The proceeds go to the Greenway Women's Shelter, in full." He raised an eyebrow. "No family inheritance." No. He didn't push. Just wrote it down. "I also want Carl removed from any and all documents where he might be listed as a beneficiary. Bank accounts, insurance, healthcare proxies, all of it." "I'll prepare the documents," he said. "We can notarize them in-house. You'll also need to update your will to reflect these changes. I've already started that with my estate lawyer." He smiled, a small curl at the corner of his mouth. Then we made it official. We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing clauses, signing forms, assigning contingencies. He explained everything with patience and precision. When we were finished, he handed me a slim binder. "This is your trust packet," he said. "Keep it safe. Everything else we'll file this week." I thanked him and left the office with a strange sense of solidity, like my spine had real weight again. On the way home, I stopped by the bakery on Main Street. I hadn't been in years. The girl behind the counter was new. She called me ma'am and gave me a free cookie for being lovely. I bought a lemon tart and ate it in the car, sunlight warm on my knees through the windshield. At home, I sat in the quiet and reread the trust documents. My name. My signature. My terms. No loopholes. No weak spots. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like someone waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. Later that evening, just as the sky began to turn, a car pulled into my driveway. Carl. He stepped out slowly, like he wasn't sure he'd be welcomed. I didn't open the door. He knocked once, then again. Finally, he called through the door. "Mom, please. I don't know what's happening." I sat on the couch, hands folded in my lap. "You changed the locks. You blocked my number. I just want to talk." He sounded less angry than uncertain, like someone trying to find the map after realizing he was no longer holding the pen. "Just tell me what's going on." I didn't answer. After a while, he left. I waited 10 minutes before I stood. I watched from the window as he backed out slowly, his face tired behind the wheel. Then I sat back down and poured myself a cup of tea. Sugar. No milk. My mother always said, "If they don't hear you softly, they'll hear the silence louder." The front yard hadn't looked this tidy in years. On Friday, I trimmed the hedges, swept the porch, even replaced the cracked bulb above the door. Not because anyone was coming, because I was leaving eventually, and I wanted the house to know I hadn't stopped caring. It wasn't the house's fault. I'd lived in it for 43 years. Moved in when Carl was 5. Back when his favorite thing was lining up toy dinosaurs along the windowsill and naming them like classmates. "This one's Rebecca. This one's Mrs. Fulton." It had been my dream house once. 3 bedrooms. A wide front window. A narrow attic I turned into a sewing room. I painted every wall myself. Tiled the kitchen floor after Frank died. Learned how to replace gutter screens when the neighbors said I should just wait for my son to help. I stopped waiting a long time ago. That afternoon, I walked through each room with a notepad. In the guest room, an old dresser I'd once offered to Carl and Jody when they needed furniture. They said it was too dated. In the hallway, a framed cross-stitch from my sister that read "Peace lives here." It had hung so long the wall behind it was cleaner than the paint around it. In the back bedroom, Carl's old room, the curtains were still the ones with little sailboats. I'd meant to replace them for years, but something always got in the way. The closet still held a dusty box of baseball cards and a shoebox labeled "Private." I didn't open it. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the window. The apple tree in the backyard leaned crooked now. Time had pulled it leftward, but it still bloomed each spring defiantly, like it didn't know it was tired. I stayed there almost an hour, remembering the day Carl climbed that tree and got stuck, wailing like a siren until I came out barefoot and furious, dragging the ladder behind me. The way he hugged me afterward, shaking with leftover tears. "Don't tell anyone," he said. And I never did. I remembered the first time he brought Jody home. The way she looked around the house like it was a motel that hadn't been reviewed yet. "It's cozy," she said. I remembered holding Ruby for the first time, her cheeks red and crumpled. Carl had cried that day. "She's perfect," he whispered. I remembered the Christmas when Jody told me not to bring food because the kids didn't eat old-fashioned things. I brought a pie anyway. Ruby never touched it. Trent said it tasted like soap. They laughed. That was the year I stopped baking for their holidays. But I never stopped baking. I stood and wrote on my notepad. "Leave the curtains. Take the quilt." In the kitchen, I opened the cabinet above the stove, my baking cabinet. Everything still in its place. Vanilla, cinnamon, brown sugar. The heavy measuring cups Frank bought me for our 10th anniversary. I wrapped them carefully and placed them in a padded box labeled "Keep." The next day, I called the apartment complex I'd clipped from the paper. A kind woman named Teresa answered. "Yes, we have a one-bedroom still available," she said. "First floor. Lots of light. It's quiet. Mostly retirees and teachers. Do you allow cats?" "We do." I didn't have a cat, but I liked knowing I could. I scheduled a viewing for Tuesday. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket and a mug of tea. The street was still. A few porch lights glowed across the way. A wind chime tinkled faintly next door. I thought of all the nights I'd sat there waiting. Headlights, footsteps, someone to remember I existed. But not this night. This night I was just sitting. No expectation. No hunger. Just me and the cool air, my name still mine, my home still quiet. I thought about Carl. I didn't miss him. Not exactly. I missed the idea of him, the boy who built Lego castles on my coffee table, who held my hand too tightly crossing the street. That boy had disappeared long ago, replaced by a man who couldn't see past his own needs, his own schedule. Maybe someday I'd mourn him properly. But not now. Now I had packing to do. The call came Sunday evening. Not from Carl, from Ruby. "Hi, Grandma," she said. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Is this still your number?" "It is." A pause. "I found it in one of Dad's old phones." He didn't know I was looking. I waited. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For the backyard. For everything, really. I didn't rush to comfort her. That instinct to shield others from their shame had lived in me a long time. I'd evicted it recently. "What are you sorry for?" I asked gently. She took a breath. "For not talking to you. For pretending not to see you at the library. For laughing when Mom said what she said. It wasn't funny. She stopped. "You just wanted to belong," I finished. "Yes." I didn't forgive her right away. That's not how real apologies work. But I did say, "Thank you for calling." "Can I see you?" she asked. "Just me." I thought of the pie drawer I'd emptied. The Christmas cards I kept sending even when none came back. The way she used to grip my hand on icy sidewalks. "All right," I said. "Come by tomorrow after school. Just you." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all summer. "I will. I promise." Monday came gray and drizzly, the kind of day that makes everything feel softer. I baked banana bread. Not for anyone in particular, just to fill the house with something warm. 4:12 Ruby knocked. She stood on the porch in a hoodie 2 sizes too big and sneakers with untied laces. Her eyes were rimmed with something that wasn't just mascara. "I wasn't sure you'd open the door," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd knock," I answered. Inside, we sat at the kitchen table. She picked at the bread. I poured tea. "Mom says you've gone crazy," she said, not unkindly. "That you're cutting us out." "I'm not cutting," I said. "I'm choosing. There's a difference." She nodded like she almost understood. "I don't hate you," I added. "I don't hate you either," she whispered. "I think I copied how they acted. I didn't question it until I started missing you." Something folded gently inside me. "I want to come back," she said. "If that's allowed." I looked at her. This girl with the same eyes Carl had at 8, before the world taught him how to be unkind. "You can come back," I said. "But not for pie. Not for gifts. Only for truth." "I can do that." She stayed an hour. We didn't talk about Carl or Jody. Just school. Books. A cat she wanted but wasn't allowed to get. She left with a second slice of banana bread wrapped in foil. That night I wrote in my journal, "Maybe some doors don't need to be slammed. Just gently locked from the inside. With a window left cracked for those who come alone and knock with care." "You blocked me," he said, not angry, just confused. "You changed everything." "Yes." "Why?" I didn't speak right away. I looked at his face, older than I remembered. Or maybe I just stopped seeing him clearly years ago. "I heard what Jod said," I told him. "I was in the backyard. I heard you laugh." He shifted. "I didn't mean it. You know how she is. She talks out of turn. It was a joke." "No, Carl. A joke has to have a punchline. That was just cruelty wrapped in silence." "I didn't know you were there," he muttered. "That's exactly the problem." He blinked. "So that's it? You're erasing me over one bad afternoon." I wanted to laugh. "One afternoon. The afternoon was just the final straw," I said. "In a stack built over years. Years of being sidelined, pitted, ignored, tolerated. A life where I was convenient but never considered." "I'm not erasing you," I said. "I'm just finally choosing myself." He frowned. "Ruby said you're letting her visit." "I am. So she gets a pass." "No. She asked to come back. You waited until your name started vanishing from documents." His face tightened. "This is about money." "No. This is about dignity." He looked past me into the hallway. Maybe he expected to see the old side table with his school photos still framed, or the basket of holiday cards I used to keep. But the hallway was clean. Clear. "I'll always be your son," he said. "And I'll always be the woman who gave you more than she should have." I stepped back and closed the door. Not slam, just shut. Through the window I saw him linger a moment longer, then leave. That night I didn't feel triumphant. I cried for 7 minutes. I timed it. I let myself feel the break. Not because I regretted it, but because endings deserve respect. Then I made tea, folded one more box, and placed it by the door marked keep. The kitchen table held only what mattered now. One teacup, a lamp, a shallow bowl of oranges. Everything else had been packed or donated. I didn't need much anymore. Just what fit inside one small life. On Sunday afternoon I hosted tea for the first time in years. Not for birthdays or holidays, just for warmth. Marka came first, with her limp and her bag of crossword books. Then Ida, in her fur-trimmed coat even though it was 52 degrees. Then Nora, my old friend from the church choir, who still wore perfume that smelled like early spring in old envelopes. They didn't bring food, though each had offered. I told them it wasn't about that. I baked a single spice cake, nothing fancy, just enough to slice once each with one wedge left over. We sat by the windows, the afternoon light soft and pale. I poured tea in my chip china. The blue set that survived 2 moves and 1 accidental drop in '94. No one asked about Carl or Ruby or the house. Instead, we talked about shoulder pain and grocery prices. Ida told a story about a bus driver who waited 2 extra minutes while she fumbled with her change. Marka said her niece got engaged to a boy who wore socks with cartoon whales on them. Nora brought up the library's poetry group and asked if we wanted to join. It was the most comfort I'd felt in years. At one point, the conversation dipped the way it always does when women over 70 drink warm things together. The room quieted, not from awkwardness but from fullness. and I said it. I'm moving. 3 sets of eyebrows lifted, but no one interrupted. I found a small place across town. I'll be gone by the end of the month. Ida leaned forward. Does your son know? He doesn't need to. Marka nodded as if that was all the explanation required. They stayed another hour, helped wash cups, wrapped the extra slice of cake in foil, said they'd call soon. When they left, the house was still, but not empty. I walked through each room again, this time not as a farewell, but as a blessing. In the hallway, I stopped by the shelf where I used to keep framed photos of Carl's family, weddings, birthdays, first days of school. I'd already packed most of them away, unsure if I'd want to hang them again. One remained. A picture of me and Frank, taken by a neighbor after we finished painting the front porch. We're both covered in splatters, holding brushes like trophies. He's laughing. I'm squinting into the sun. I took the photo and wrapped it in a kitchen towel. It went into the box labeled Essentials. Later that night, I opened my journal and wrote, 3 women drank tea in my kitchen today. No one interrupted. No one explained. No one corrected. We just existed together. That entry meant more than all the Christmas newsletters I used to write, filled with pretend happiness and obligatory gratitude. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Jody. Short. Cold. I heard you spoke to Ruby, and Carl says you've been hostile. If this is your way of getting attention, it's really sad. I played it once, then deleted it. Hostile. That's what they called a woman who finally spoke up. That's what they called silence when it no longer served them. I opened the back door and stepped into the yard. The air smelled of wet leaves and the faint sweetness of old grass. I walked barefoot through the patch of lawn I'd mowed myself for decades. At the far corner where the garden used to be, the dirt was still dark. I knelt slowly, ignoring the ache in my knees, and dug my fingers into the soil. I planted 3 marigold seeds from an old paper packet I'd found while packing. Just 3, not to bloom but to mark something. The doorbell rang at 10:42 a.m. sharp on Wednesday. I knew it wasn't the postman. He came at noon, give or take. And it wasn't Kay, who knocked like she was always halfway apologizing. No. This knock was practiced. Polite. When I opened the door, Jody stood there in heels too high for the weather and a coat the color of wet bone. Her lipstick was perfect, but her eyes were tight. Mabel, she said, like she was reading the word off a clipboard. Jody. She didn't ask to come in. She stepped past me like she still lived in the narrative where that was allowed. I closed the door behind her. Slowly. Deliberately. She stood in the middle of my living room like someone preparing to deliver a pitch, hands clasped too tightly around her purse. This is getting out of hand, she began. You've blocked Carl. You've changed your accounts. Ruby is sneaking around to call you. And now I hear you're moving. All true, I said calmly. She blinked, thrown off by the lack of resistance. We're your family, she said, putting weight on the word like it was an anchor. You can't just erase us because of a bad day. I'm not erasing anyone, I said. It wasn't one bad day. It was years of polite dismissal, of lukewarm invitations, of being tolerated instead of welcomed. One day just pulled the curtain back. Her jaw tightened. We never asked you for anything. That's the problem, I said. You never asked. You just expected. I don't know what Carl ever did to deserve this, she snapped. He's a good man. Good men don't laugh when someone wonders why their mother is still alive, I replied, my voice steady. She stepped closer. You think you're punishing him? You're punishing Ruby. She's confused, hurt, and you're using her to prove some kind of point. That made me pause, not because she was right, but because of how easily guilt still knew my name. Ruby came to me alone, I said. She's 16. She knows what a closed door feels like. Jody scoffed. You've always made things dramatic. No, I said, sharper now. I've always made things possible. The down payment on your house. The babysitting. The casseroles. The last-minute rides. The silent endurance at birthdays where I was placed behind centerpieces, so I wouldn't ruin the aesthetic. She turned, pacing. You're exaggerating. You've always been difficult. I smiled then, but not kindly. Is that what women become when they stop handing over their silence? Her mouth opened, closed. Then she noticed the packed boxes near the front door. You're really doing it. I am. And what happens when you're alone in that little apartment? She demanded. When no one's left to check on you. When Ruby forgets to call. I'll still have myself, I said. And I'd rather be alone with honesty than surrounded by people who flinch at my presence. She looked around as if the house might help her win. As if the walls might join in. You're throwing everything away. No, I said, picking up the binder with my trust documents and placing it on the table. I'm finally choosing what to keep. Jody stood there a moment longer. Then she picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned. Don't expect us to come running when you change your mind. I'm not running, I said. And I won't. The door closed behind her like punctuation. Later that evening, Ruby texted me a single line. She came home fuming. You okay? I wrote back perfectly. Some doors need closing, Ruby. It doesn't mean you're on the other side. She sent a heart emoji followed by, still bringing cookies Thursday. Don't bail. I didn't. And I wouldn't. The papers were ready. Lena called Thursday morning. Everything's signed, filed, confirmed. The trust is active. Your accounts are protected. And your will is updated. You're now the sole decision maker of every inch of your life. Thank you, I said. 2 words that held more weight than most confessions. I'm proud of you, Mabel. I smiled into the phone. Funny how many people say that only after you start saying no. By noon, I was at the bank, binder in hand, handing over the final forms. The clerk was young, barely 25, but she treated the documents like something sacred. I liked that. We'll update the beneficiaries right away, she said. And this authorizes removal of your son from all shared access. It does. She nodded with the kind of calm efficiency I once mistook for coldness. Now I understood. She was simply prepared like me. Afterward, I walked 2 blocks to the post office and picked up a key for a new P.O. box. When they asked for a forwarding address, I declined. Anyone who truly needed to find me already knew where I was. Back at home, the afternoon light softened through the curtains. I brewed a fresh cup of tea and pulled out the last envelope, my medical directive. A copy for my new doctor, another for the safe box. It felt like sewing the final thread in a dress I'd been mending for years. At 3:30, Ruby arrived. She brought chocolate chip cookies in a plastic container and a magazine with a quiz titled "What Type of Flower Are You?" We sat on the porch eating cookies and circling answers in pencil. I was apparently a lilac, quiet, observant, easily underestimated. Ruby was a marigold, resilient and hard to root out. She read aloud, grinning. That checks. When the cookies were gone, we just sat. She swung her legs lightly under the bench. Dad says you're turning your back on family. I didn't respond right away. He's hurt, she added softer. Not that it excuses anything, but it's all he talks about. Then he's finally talking about something that matters, I said. She looked down at her lap. I miss the old you. No, I said. You miss the version of me who let herself be erased quietly. That wasn't me. That was survival. She nodded. I get that now. We sat a while longer. Then she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It's just a sketch, she said, suddenly shy. I made it last night. I don't know if it's any good. I unfolded it. A pencil drawing, rough but clear. A woman seated in a chair, back straight, eyes forward. In front of her, a chessboard. On her side, just 2 pieces. On the other, a full set. But her pieces were in winning positions. She's not done, Ruby said. She's just starting to play her game. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I reached out and squeezed her hand. Can I hang it in the new apartment? I asked. She lit up. Really? Really? As the sky turned peach behind the rooftops, she stood to leave. I know this doesn't fix everything, she said. But I want to be around if you'll have me. I will, I said. But only as you are. No pretending. She grinned. Marigolds don't pretend. After she left, I sat alone for a long time. The drawing in my lap. The house quiet around me. All the paperwork signed. All the decisions made. No more permissions to seek. No more hoping for invitations that came too late or too shallow. It was done, not bitterly but firmly. Tomorrow I would begin packing the final boxes. And after that, something better than hope. Space. Moving day arrived quiet, without ceremony. I woke before dawn, made coffee in the same chipped mug I'd used for over 20 years, and stood in the kitchen one last time barefoot, the linoleum cool under my soles. The light hadn't yet reached the windows, but I didn't need it. I knew every inch of this house in the dark. The movers came at 9 more or less on time. 2 young men, polite fast, a little surprised by how few boxes I had. I'd labeled everything clearly. Kitchen keep. Closet donate. Bedroom memories. And one marked do not open yet. They didn't ask questions. By noon the house was nearly empty. The walls looked tired, like they were exhaling. I walked through each room slowly, my fingers grazing surfaces one last time. Not to cling but to thank. In the hallway, I paused where Carl's height marks used to be, long painted over. I could still feel the indentations if I pressed lightly enough. 5 years old. 7. 11. A lifetime of inches that couldn't be undone. I didn't cry. I placed a small envelope in the top drawer of the empty hallway table. Inside was one key and a note that simply read, "This house taught me everything. Thank you." Then I locked the front door behind me and didn't look back. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. The movers placed the boxes exactly where I asked. I tipped them too much. I didn't care. Teresa from the office brought me a welcome packet and a small plant. "Something green," she said. "For your windowsill." It was a tiny succulent in a ceramic pot shaped like a cat. I placed it beside the kitchen sink and whispered, "I think we'll get along." The first thing I unpacked was the kettle. The second was Ruby's drawing. I hung it near the window where the light caught it softly, the pencil lines glowing like they were freshly drawn. That night I made toast and ate on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket. No noise, just wind and the occasional hum of someone else's television through the wall. I didn't feel lost. I felt spacious. The next morning I unpacked the last box. Inside were the essentials: 2 dresses, a pair of shoes, a tin of buttons I'd collected over decades, and a letter folded in thirds, yellowed slightly at the edges. Frank's handwriting. The letter he'd written before his surgery. The one he didn't survive. If something goes wrong, don't fold in. Stay open. Stay warm. Live with your hands unclenched. You have more strength than you know. I placed it in the same drawer where I kept my will. That afternoon I baked for the first time in the new oven. Banana bread. Again, by now more ritual than recipe. As it baked, the apartment filled with a smell so familiar I closed my eyes and smiled. At 4, Ruby arrived with her school bag and a fresh bruise on her cheek. "Nothing serious," she said. "Volleyball." "I brought jam," she added, holding up a small jar. "Fig and something." I thought it sounded like you. We sat at the little table by the window, 2 pieces of warm bread between us. She spread the jam thick and slow, then looked up. "Is this what peace feels like?" "Not all of it," I said. "But a corner of it, yes." She ate with both hands like she used to when she was small, crumbs trailing across the napkin. She told me about a boy in her class who'd drawn a beard on his mask and got sent to the principal's office. About her English teacher who said 34 times during one lecture. About how Jod was furious with me for turning down a birthday invitation. "She said you were making a spectacle of yourself." "I'm not making anything," I said. "I'm simply not showing up where I'm not wanted." I told her I wanted to come anyway, and she said she couldn't stop me, but she wouldn't drive me. "You walked." "No. I borrowed Grandpa's bike. It's in bad shape, but it got me here." That made me smile. Frank would have liked that. "You can leave it locked on the balcony," I said. "We'll fix it up together." Her eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" After she left, I watched the sun lower behind the row of trees outside. I didn't miss the house. I didn't miss Carl's silences or Jod's sideways smiles. I didn't miss the old version of myself who whispered, "Maybe next time they'll see you." Because now I saw myself. And I no longer needed permission to exist. 1 week after the move, the house sold. The realtor called to say the offer came in just above asking. An older couple, no kids, looking for quiet and history, she said. I almost laughed. They'd found both. I didn't go back. Not even for the walkthrough. I gave Charles power of attorney, signed what needed signing, and let it go. He called when it closed. "It's done," he said. I thanked him, hung up, and stood in the middle of my apartment. It wasn't large, but every inch of it was mine. I opened a new bank account for the shelter donation. I didn't put it in my will. I gave it now. I walked in myself, handed the check to the director and said, "This is for the women who leave without shoes." She stared at the amount and started to cry. I didn't. I'd done my crying. This wasn't grief. This was intention. That night I made soup. Not for anyone. Not for an occasion. Just because I liked the way leeks softened in butter. The radio played quietly in the background. Some jazz station with no ads. Just saxophones and soft rhythms that didn't ask for applause. I ate in my robe standing by the stove. No table setting. No explanations. Just hunger met. At around 8:30 my buzzer rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I answered I heard Ruby's voice. "Can I come up?" Of course. She was carrying a shoebox and wearing an oversized sweatshirt, sleeves pulled over her hands. "What's in the box?" "Stuff I'm not ready to keep at home." Inside. A notebook, a phone charger, a necklace that wasn't Jod's taste, a photo of her and me at the zoo when she was 5. She had chocolate on her face. I'd forgotten that day. She hadn't. "I don't want to live there when I'm older," she said suddenly, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "With them, I mean." "You won't have to," I said. "You get to choose. Even if they hate me for it." "Especially then," she said and nodded thoughtful. "Do you think people can change?" "Sometimes. But I think the better question is whether they can stop pretending." She looked up at me. "Are you still angry?" "No. I'm finished." Ruby stayed until nearly 10. We didn't talk about Carl. She didn't ask for stories and I didn't offer. Some threads don't need tying. When she left, she hugged me tighter than she ever had before. The next morning I walked to the corner store for milk. The man behind the register nodded at me like I was already part of the routine. "You're the banana bread lady," he said. "The kid with the bike talks about you." I smiled. "That's me." I bought a newspaper just because I could and read it on the balcony, feet tucked under me. The world still turned. Bills still came. But the silence in my chest was no longer heavy. It was restful. Later that week a letter arrived. No return address. Carl's handwriting. I opened it slowly. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if you want me to." I said things I can't unsay. I let things happen. I should have stopped them. "I don't know how to be the man you deserve, and I'm scared it's too late to learn. But Ruby talks about you every day now. She's different, braver. That came from you. I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll let me try." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not forgiveness. Not refusal. Just a space where it could rest undisturbed. That night I wrote in my journal. "I am not angry anymore. Not afraid. Not afraid. I am not waiting at windows or watching porches. I am not a forgotten guest at someone else's table. I am building my own." The day I turned 73, I woke without an alarm. No balloons. No surprise texts from relatives who remembered me once a year. No brunch reservations or gift bags left on stoops. Just morning light through clean curtains, the sound of rain somewhere in the distance, and the soft breath of a life that now belonged only to me. I made pancakes, 2 of them, and ate them with honey and a sliced pear. Then I sat in the middle of my apartment with Frank's photo propped on a chair and said, "Well, we got here, didn't we?" At noon Ruby came. She brought red tulips still wrapped in the florist's paper. "You're not a birthday cake person," she said. "So I brought flowers. Like grown-ups do." She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a card she'd made, painted, not drawn. On the front, 2 chairs on a porch. One empty. One with a teacup resting on the arm. Inside it read, "Thanks for keeping a seat for me." We had tea and toast and talked about her final exams, her plan to work part-time at the shelter over the summer, and how she was trying to convince her school to start a support group for kids who didn't feel like home was home. She asked if she could use my name. "Only if you use it for something true," I said. She laughed. "That's the only way I use it now." Before she left, she said, "You look different." "I feel different." She studied me like she was taking inventory. "You look like someone who doesn't flinch." After she was gone, I sat on the balcony with a book I'd been meaning to read for 15 years. I read 3 chapters then put it down, not because I was tired but because I didn't need to finish things just to prove I could. The next day, I mailed a donation to a legal fund for elder women in housing disputes. No note, just the check and the name of the trust, quietly placed like a stone in the right hand. I also planted basil in a small clay pot. It wilted at first, then perked up, leaning toward the kitchen window like it had decided to live. One morning Carl texted, "Happy birthday, Mom. I didn't send a card. I figured I haven't earned that yet. Just wanted you to know I'm still here." I didn't respond, not out of anger, because not every apology needs an answer. Some simply need to land where harm was once ignored. That evening I invited Marka and Ida over. Nora couldn't come, she caught a cold, but sent a crossword clipping with a note. 12 down made me think of you. The answer's anchor. We drank tea, laughed about knees and politics, and how Teresa from the leasing office had taken up bird watching in the hallway. They brought cherry pie and a promise to come again next week. After they left, I stood in the doorway and listened. Not for footsteps fading or silence returning, but for the sound of a house filled again, this time with the right kind of noise. That night, before turning out the light, I wrote the final entry in that journal. They asked why I was still alive. Now I know. To remember my name. To set my own table. To keep the door open just wide enough for those who knock with clean hands.